Hello, good day, and welcome to our second video lecture series. The first lecture series we uploaded talked about philosophy and its three definitions. I hope by now you have learned them by heart, and I hope that you won't forget them ever. We have also established the fact that philosophy is a constant search for truth and meaning, that we are journeymen, and in this journey of ours, it is our hope that every day we learn something new and make sense of everything that we learn. These things will make us wiser. In this second videos lecture series, I intend to talk about the history of philosophy. Specifically, though, I'd like to point out how one philosophical era shifted to another. When we speak of philosophy, as I've said during the first lecture series, we would always go back to the times of the early Greeks. Sometimes we refer to them as the ancient Greeks. So, in many books of history, when you open them, they will always begin with Thales of Militus, the earliest recorded Greek philosopher who claimed that everything came from water. Water. And then the philosopher after him claimed that everything came from fire. Later on, we have another philosopher who claims that everything is boundless. And then we have Heraclitus who would say that everything is in constant state of flux, everything is in constant motion, etc., etc. But they never called themselves philosophers yet, because just like what I mentioned during the previous video, it was Pythagoras who coined the term philosophy, the lovers of wisdom. So, what made these guys philosophers? They didn't call themselves philosophers because they asked the question, the first philosophical question: where did everything come from? What makes up everything? Saan nanggaling ang lahat? Saan nanggaling ang buhay? Sabi ni Thales, water. The rest, fire, air, etc., etc. One thing is very evident, that the answers came from things that they see around them, from the universe, from the cosmos. That's why this philosophical era is described as cosmocentric. Cosmos meaning universe, the universe being the provider of truth and meaning. And so when these early Greeks asked questions, they would always look into the universe. They would always look for answers into the things they see around them. Universe became the provider of truth and meaning. Pagka may sakit ang isang tao, saan sila hagilap na sagot ng cure? Things that they see around them. The truth that they knew was provided by the universe. Cosmocentrism, ancient philosophical era from 600 BCE to 600 AD. The end of this philosophical era marked the beginning of another philosophical era, which is what we call the medieval times. In philosophy, it is referred as the medieval philosophical era. What happened? There was a shift. If in the ancient philosophical era, the provider of truth and meaning was the universe, and it is described as cosmocentric, This philosophical era, 600 AD to 1600 AD, the provider of truth and meaning was God. Theocentric, as we describe it. Theocentrism. God became the provider of truth and meaning. And that's the reason why many of our medieval philosophers or thinkers were saints of the church. We have Saint Thomas Aquinas, Saint Augustine, Saint Anselm. All these philosophers talked about the existence of God. In another video, we shall talk about the 5 proofs or arguments of Saint Thomas Aquinas. 5 pruweba na magsasabing merong Diyos. What I'm pointing out here is this. God became the provider of truth and meaning. So that when man has questions, maghahagilap siya ng sagot sa Diyos. Or God would provide answers to his questions. So there was the shift from cosmocentrism to theocentrism. From 600 AD to 1600 AD. The end of this medieval period marked also the beginning of another philosophical era, which is what we call the modern philosophical era. Anong nangyari? If in the ancient philosophical era to medieval philosophical era, the shift was from cosmocentrism to theocentrism, the shift that transpired from medieval to modern was from theocentrism to anthropocentrism. Again, we are talking about the search for truth and meaning at kung ano yung sinandalan ng tao bilang source ng katotohanan at kahulugan. In the modern philosophical era, man's source for truth and meaning was himself. From theocentrism to anthropocentrism, man became the master of his faith and the captain of his soul. He becomes now the provider of meaning to other man. Rene Descartes is a father of modern philosophy. As to why he was called the father of modern philosophy, we shall talk in a separate video. But because of his philosophical reflections, he was able to come up with one truth. With one truth. This we call the methodic doubt, which we shall discuss in a separate video. But my point here is simple. The shifting of the source of truth and meaning happened from one era to another, meaning that truth varied from one epoch to another. From cosmocentrism to theocentrism to anthropocentrism. From ancient philosophical era to medieval philosophical era to modern philosophical era. From the universe as the provider of truth and meaning to God as the provider of truth and meaning to man as the provider of truth and meaning. Dito ba natapos? Modern philosophical era started 1600 to 1900s. So what happened from 1900s to present? This we call as the contemporary philosophical era. The contemporary philosophical era, otherwise called as the post-modern philosophical era, is described as the philosophy of plurality, the philosophy of inclusivity. Because in this kind of philosophy, you are not limiting one school of thought. It includes all philosophical school of thoughts, even the Oriental philosophy. It does not limit its investigations and philosophical reflections on cosmocentrism, theocentrism, or anthropocentrism. You are not limited and bound to study only one concept. It accommodates everything. So, the time that we're living in now is described as postmodern because we become more liberal. We accommodate all things. We do not exclude other beliefs, but we accept them, we investigate, and we study them. Again, the intention of this video is to show you the partial history of philosophy and also to describe to you the shifts that transpired during different philosophical eras. Other supplemental videos will be uploaded soon. If you have questions about this, feel free to ask them to me during our synchronous class. Thank you very much. God bless.